I'm Joe Stewart, the Vice President for Governmental Affairs for the Independent Insurance Agents of North Carolina. We're very fortunate today to have with us Mike Causey, the Commissioner of Insurance of North Carolina. Commissioner, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Joe. It's good to be with you today.
Well, you've been in office now, coming in on the midpoint of your first term in office. You've been very busy, very engaged with the agent community as well as with carriers. Now, tell us a little bit about what you've accomplished during this first 18 months in the Department of Insurance.
Yeah, I think busy is an understatement. I never dreamed it would be quite this busy.
Right.
Yesterday, I was in Raleigh here at the office, and I had over 20 meetings yesterday, plus we did a hot cars event. And it's about the same today. So I try to get out of Raleigh every chance I can, and every week go out and visit different counties, meet with the fire chiefs and the sheriffs and the elected officials in the counties to see what issues are happening locally that we could help with from the Office of State Fire Marshal or Department of Insurance.
Well, you know, it's interesting. An elected official in North Carolina does have as their constituent every person in North Carolina, but literally as Commissioner of Insurance, you have to be all around the state because the issues that you address are statewide.
That's right. We have 100 counties, and across those 100 counties, we have 1,351 fire stations. Mm-hmm. And every fire department, as you know, is the center of the community, the hub of that community. I always say, growing up in rural North Carolina on the farm, it was the church and the fire department. It was always the center of everything that happened in that community. And it's still that way today in most of these rural communities.
Well, in your tenure now, you've gone through 2 sessions of the General Assembly. Tell us a little bit about what you've accomplished working with North Carolina's legislature.
Well, I'm happy to say that worked closely with the legislature from the day we came into office. The first place that I visited after meeting all the employees at the Department of Insurance was to sit down with our Criminal Investigations Division to find out how bad is insurance fraud in North Carolina. I'd heard all these horror stories from campaigning across the state, and I was surprised to find out that every single month, and it's very consistent, we get between 400 and 500 serious criminal complaints, mostly referred to us by insurance companies, that matters that they deem serious enough to be referred to criminal investigation. We also have arson cases to look into. The other concern that I noticed early on was fire department inspections. We were way behind. We had fire departments in North Carolina that hadn't been inspected in 25 years.
Wow.
There was one down in Craven County, it had been 28 years.
Wow.
Now, ideally, you'd want your fire department inspected every few years, every 5 years anyway. And when I asked the question, why is this happening? Why did the department get so far behind? It was a simple answer. They only had 5 people to cover 100 counties.
Right.
So you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out we needed more inspectors. The other thing that I noticed was in prosecuting these criminal cases, it was sometimes taking a long time to get these cases in the court and move through the courts. So it seemed to me that the solution would be to get a prosecutor, someone that had worked with the court system as a prosecutor, to work with district attorneys.
Right.
And we did that. So what we did early on, with the help of the legislature, we were able to convince the legislature that we needed additional positions, primarily for law enforcement, for criminal investigations. And this is a little trivia. Not many people know that North Carolina was the first state in the nation to put law enforcement under a Department of Insurance, and that was back in 1945, and that was the same year the McCarran-Ferguson Act came into existence. So the legislature did see fit to grant us additional positions, and primarily because we're a self-funded agency, we bring a lot of revenue into the state. It's fast approaching $1 billion, but it's approximately $750 million in revenue that we bring in to the general fund. And so I'm having to fight to say, let us keep a little more of the money we're bringing in so we can do other things. So just to give you the thumbnail version, in the past year, we have doubled the size of our criminal investigations. We created a new group. It's called the Fraud Control Group. And I hired a former police chief out of High Point, North Carolina, Marty Sumner, who had an impeccable track record there. He was serving as a consultant to police departments all across the nation and traveling around the country and sometimes out of the country. But I convinced him to come to Raleigh to take on this assignment. So he's leading the way with the Fraud Control Group. So under the Fraud Control Group, we have the Criminal Investigation Division. Those are our special agents that go out and make arrests for any type of insurance fraud. We also brought arson investigations in-house to the Office of State Fire Marshal and the Fraud Control Group, so we're doing arson investigations now. In addition, we regulate bail bonds and surety bonds, so we set up a bail bond regulatory division and just to look after those bail bond issues. And we created a totally new division to look at more accounting, financial fraud, forensic accounting, and in-depth investigations, and that's called the Special Services Review Division, where they look at the financials to see if there is anything that needs to be referred to criminal investigations, or if it's something that can be settled without going that route. So that was a big task.
Quite a bit.
And when I took office, we had a total of 20. In January of 2017, there was 20 sworn law enforcement officers to cover 100 counties. 5 of those were management, so we only had 15 people that could go out and make arrests. We swore in earlier this year 18 on one day. We just swore in 8 more last Friday at the Supreme Court. So we now have gone from 20 to 40 on the law enforcement side. We added 3 additional fire department inspectors, 2 former fire chiefs, 1 former county fire marshal, and I'm happy to report that that backlog of fire department inspections has been whittled down. We don't have any that I know of that's over 10 years now. And another thing that I'm happy to report is that a large number of fire departments in this state have substantially upgraded their ratings, and you know how that ties into homeowners, and it's good for the people in that district. And there's other things we've done, but those are some of the things that I'm most proud of.
Well, you did speak quite a bit on the campaign trail in 2016 about the need to be more rigorous relative to fraud. I think many people don't understand the nexus between fraud and the cost of insurance. What the premium is driven at least in part by fraudulent activity, so cutting down on fraud is important to the consumer.
And that's how we sold it to the legislature. I said, look, we don't have to do anything about this, but if you don't push back, that's going to continue the upward pressure and the rates are going to continue to rise. So it's a good thing when people know that somebody's looking. And I am happy to say that we have made a number of arrests. It's sad really to see when you see these roofing contractors, a lot of them come in from out of state to take advantage of senior citizens after a storm or something. We've made a number of arrests on roofing contractor scams, and I was happy to see last week the Attorney General had a press conference that his office too is going after these roofing contractors. So this is good. We've worked closely with other agencies. I've worked closely with the Attorney General on Operation Medicine Drop, which was a program started here in the Department of Insurance back in 2010. And since 2010, we've collected over 1.3 million pills unused prescriptions, that sort of thing.
That's incredible. Well, and you have been, since you've been in office, very gracious about forming a number of different task forces
Right.
involving the carrier community and agents to talk about important issues on a wide range of public policy matters. Talk a little bit about what task forces you formed and what you've seen them accomplish working in that collaborative fashion.
We oversee 23 state boards and commissions. So I always tell folks, if you know anybody that's interested in serving, like one friend of mine up in the mountains said, look, I'm on plenty of boards and commissions and most of them don't pay anything. Well, he said, I want something that pays. Well, most of these are volunteer boards, as you know, but it's a great honor to serve on something like the beach plan or the fair plan or some of these other risk management committees and other groups that we have, like the Seniors Health Insurance Information Program, Safe Kids North Carolina. All of those are great programs, and we need volunteers. But we also have just advisory groups for property casualty, life and health, and we have to have a good communication between the agents and the companies to find out what are the issues. You heard it, I heard it about the consent to rate and how much of a problem it was for some of these agents to track down the person and get a live actual signature on that form. We worked diligently with the legislature to get that resolved, so beginning January 1st, we don't have to track those folks down to get that signature.
Well, and we were talking earlier too, some of the task force work is to improve efficiency within the Department of Insurance using technology and other things to make the regulatory functions that you're responsible for even more efficient.
Right. My main goal has been to make the Department of Insurance more user-friendly. So if you're an agent and you call in and you need a question answered, they may not know the answer, but they'll find out. Somebody will get back to you really quick. If you're a consumer, you have a problem with a claim or have a problem with anything pertaining to insurance, we have people on those phones 8 hours a day, Monday through Friday, and they are really good at what they do. One thing, I inherited a lot of good employees, and one thing that I've learned about state employees is the vast majority are not political. They don't really care who the governor is, which political party. They're working to do their best to help the people of North Carolina. And as elected officials, we do the same.
Right. Well, it is sometimes a bit of a challenge in this environment, in the research triangle where you're drawing most of your employees, to be competitive with the private sector. But you've done a good job in these new positions, hiring them quickly and finding people qualified and capable and bringing them on board.
Well, that's the downside, I guess, when I say we've done a tremendous job in doubling our criminal investigations capabilities. The downside is the pay scale for what we pay at the state level for these trained law enforcement is below the private sector. So we have lost some folks to banks and other private companies that pay substantially more. That's something I'll be working with the legislature on next session to try to, especially on those criminal investigators, try to see if we could up the pay scale just a little bit.
Well, you and your whole department has been very good about involving the agent community every time there's been a task force. If you have a spot for an agent on any of these boards and commissions and you need to fill it, you let me know. I've got lots of people in mind. I'd be delighted to serve.
Well, you tell them to send in their name and their card.
Absolutely.
We've got a spot for a lot of those folks because people do come off those boards and we have to replace them. So.
Well, and one of the things that we'll be looking to work together with you on in 2019 when the legislative session starts in January of next year is on the issue of distracted driving. And I know you personally feel very strongly about this issue and have expressed a tremendous willingness to work with us going forward, starting in the 2019 legislative session, to try to address this very serious issue in North Carolina.
Distracted driving is probably the number one thing that's pushing the rates up because there's more accidents. I went to a National Association of Insurance Commissioners meeting last year and heard for the first time we had automobile insurance companies losing money
Right.
in something that's in the past been a profitable line, and it was because of the record amount they're paying out for claims.
Right.
All this new technology, you got cameras in the bumpers now,
Right.
and when you have an accident, that's a lot of extra money.
Right.
And you've got all these gadgets in the car that distract from looking at the road, and
Right.
people are still, unfortunately, looking at cell phones, texting while driving, all of those things that we've had a number of people killed just from that.
Right. Well, and we appreciate being a part of a coalition, including you in the department, looking at ways to address this. Perhaps Senator Jeff Tart from Mecklenburg
Right.
County has introduced legislation in the past. As you know, we have State Representative Kevin Corbin, who's a member of the
Correct.
Independent Insurance Agents, serves on House Insurance. He's very interested in being a champion for this, and 3 new legislators coming in next year will also be independent agents. One, Vicki Sawyer's already been appointed to
Correct.
fill a vacated seat in the Senate. So we'll have an abundance of allies on this issue in 2019.
Yeah, well, Representative Corbin and I talk on a regular basis, and he is a staunch supporter, as Senator Tart. He and I talk on a regular basis also, and I know both of those are some of our chief allies in this battle to educate the public about the dangers of distracted driving.
Right. Well, we've had conversations. Georgia just enacted prohibition. South
Right.
Carolina discussed it but didn't move legislation forward. In matters of public policy, as you're well aware, sometimes it takes a while to get legislators to the point where they understand the issue in a way and what the remedy is under the law that makes the most
Yeah,
sense.
as you know from walking the halls over the years, as you have, this is not a new issue.
Right.
It's come up, cell phones and driving has come up numerous times. But when you look at the facts and the cost and how it's driving up our insurance rate, I think that makes a strong case for hands-free driving. We don't want somebody to be killed in an accident because they had to go pick up that phone or return a text message or something like that.
Yeah, and I think we can find a reasonable approach that's enforceable by the police, that makes sense under the law and actually addresses the problem.
Right.
Well,
We have a lot of work to do. We'll never run out of things to do.
The beautiful thing about insurance is there's always something, right, Commissioner?
That's exactly right, Joe.
Well, Commissioner Causey, thank you so much for joining us, and I appreciate you taking time out to speak to the independent insurance agent community here in North Carolina.
Well, thank you for having me, and come back to see us anytime.
Thanks so much.